In this politics video, I want to discuss Senator Bernie Sanders' Make Billionaires Pay Act, and I want to compare the responses from left and right-wing media. Let's take a look at Fox Business.
Bernie Sanders going after the wealthy again. He wants to take back the money they made during the pandemic. Lauren, who's he targeting?
He's not being subtle. He's calling this legislation the Make Billionaires Pay Act. And it would take billions from the executives of our biggest and most popular companies. He's imposing a 60% tax on what they gained between March 18th and January 1st of 2021, meaning the wealth that they amassed during the pandemic will face a one-time tax. Proceeds would be used to pay for Americans' healthcare bills for 1 year. It's a tax on their success. 467 billionaires would be hit by it.
You know, Lauren, the bottom line is nobody's going to shed any tears about these guys losing some extra billions, but it doesn't work. Wealth taxes have been tried all over the world, and in the overwhelming cases, the countries that started wealth taxes withdrew them because people can move capital. People are not, these billionaires didn't get rich by being dumb. They're smart. They know how to move their capital out of the country that's overtaxing them, and that's exactly what would happen here.
And it makes the assumption that they're not generous enough as it is, that they don't pour their money and their time into their companies and their workers and to charity in general.
Well, and again, nobody's going to lose any sleep worrying about a billionaire if they have a couple of billion less. But the bottom line is it just doesn't work. It's simple math. Yeah. That's why countries have gotten rid of it.
The key message on Fox Business is it just doesn't work, and that these businesses have already been investing enormous sums into helping people and pushing good causes. And that's certainly very true of certain executives and not so true of others. Let's take a peek at CNBC and how they handle the same coverage.
Probably something that's a non-starter, but it's certainly going to be an exercise that has people running through what billionaires have made and where that money could go.
The other issue, by the way, and I'm sure other shareholders who might not otherwise be sympathetic with the Jeff Bezos would become sympathetic with the Jeff Bezos, is because he would have to sell his shares to actually pay the tax bill, in which case all of a sudden there would be an overhang on the stock and people would get upset about whether the value of their stock is going to go down effectively because he has to sell his shares.
Well, and also just how much control you lose over a company at that point, too. A lot of these founders like to keep their company to make sure that they can continue to do it. Some of them can do it through a different voting share structure, but not all of them have that set up, and Amazon doesn't.
Right. That's true. That's actually very, very, very true.
Yeah.
Meantime,
didn't Bezos sell like Didn't he sell like $3 billion worth of stock earlier this week? How much?
He sells down regularly to pay for his space explorations. That's typically
must be nice.
He's trying to find
in the past, that's what he
a little
said,
tongue in
when he sells
cheek.
The shares.
Right
that's what
there
he's selling
about
them for.
Selling it for the other business,
Elon
space
Musk
exploration.
often talk about the reason that they do this in terms of resources is, in terms of money at this point, is literally to fund the other endeavor, which I've always found sort of fascinating.
Sure. So, from CNBC's perspective, they're talking about having to sell the shares. Now, that's definitely true because a lot of the executives take their compensation through company stock. So, essentially, the way they're measuring that their actual wealth has increased has been because of the increasing value of the shares. So, in order to have any money to cover such a tax, you'd have to sell a large portion of the company. So, as far as how you handle that, that's a very specific thing that would have to be figured out if you were to tax or have a wealth tax of some kind or wealth income tax during crises or some, very important times where it's needed. Now, both channels took the perspective of saying you can't really feel bad for the billionaires for losing this money. And certainly I would take a similar side where you can't really feel bad for someone who has billions if they were to lose a little bit of that or pay more in taxes. So in general, you'd think that it's fair enough if they have to pay a little bit more. Now, I think, though, the key idea behind the bill, though, I don't think the sponsors actually, including Senator Sanders, I don't think they actually expect this to get anywhere close to passing. I think it's meant more to highlight a phenomenon of something that's taking place during COVID-19. So we have a system in which certain companies are, so to say, they will never fail. They are too big to fail. And oftentimes our government actually favors and basically picks the winners, and they favor which companies will be the top dogs, which ones will win, and which ones will lose. And the winners are almost never small businesses. So because of the way that the lockdowns and things for COVID-19 were implemented, a lot of big box stores remained open while smaller players had to close down their shop because they either could not properly comply with COVID-19 safety measures, or they could not, for some other reason, they did not fit the guideline for a business that could continue operating. So because of this artificial kind of bubble here where we favor the big stores where they're able to stay open and provide people with the goods they need to survive during sort of a pandemic time, they disproportionately got all of the economic activity during that time, and the small businesses got crushed. So I think the point of this bill is not for it to actually ever pass or get close to passing, and especially because the implementation would have to be something special, because like they were saying, the shareholder issue is actually a pretty big thing because they wouldn't have access to that money to pay the bill. But basically, this is highlighting a certain part of our capitalism where the biggest companies end up getting propped up, sometimes to a point where they cannot fail and they just balloon in size and get bigger and bigger and are pretty much immune to anything that happens to them, meaning that the executives at those companies would continue to have ballooning wealth no matter what happens, regardless of how the world goes. So after you get to a certain size, it's almost as if it's not so much a meritocracy, meaning it's not so much important how well you're implementing your business, and it becomes more like oligarchy, where your business is so big already, it literally cannot fail, so it's going to continue to balloon in size. And one interesting thing to consider on a final note is this is not related to wealth tax, but as far as taxes go, there was one point during Eisenhower's presidency when the top marginal tax rate was as high as 92%. So the top dollars, whatever was in that range, the executives would pay 92% on that income. So certainly, now that's just for an income tax. Certainly, high taxes are not a thing that is completely new in the US, but a wealth tax of this kind that was proposed, the Make Billionaires Pay Act, that I believe is kind of a new phenomenon that I've not seen anyone suggest. And I think the main point was to drive this discussion about examining these companies, which just become so huge that they are basically monoliths upon themselves and nothing can bring them down. And some banks are like this too. Like, basically, if a bank messes up, they have so much people's money in the system that you actually have to bail them out. Because if you don't bail them out, there's going to be a whole mess with all of their clients, which would be a significant portion of the American population. So these big companies are almost artificially held up. And that's the key piece to think about when you want to consider something like this particular tax legislation.